Welcome back to Movie Summary. Today we are diving into a film called The Bigger Splash. In part 1, we met Marianne, a famous singer who was on vacation with her boyfriend Paul. When her ex-boyfriend, very loud, comes to stay with them. He also brought his daughter, Penny. His name is Harry. He tries to get Marianne back. Meanwhile, his daughter laid down naked in front of Paul, told him to get closer, and he did. Marianne and Harry come back from the supermarket. Harry introduces Marianne to some friends. They cook her some food. Marianne tasted it and loves it. She steps out, takes some fresh air. And we have this feeling of unease. Harry joins her. She apologizes to him for screaming at him that she will never leave Paul. The night is falling. Both finally come back to the home they are staying. Marianne looks for Paul but is nowhere to be found. Harry then kisses Marianne passionately. She hesitates, but the temptation is too big. As they are about to make love, she cries and says she can't. He then says, then we shouldn't see each other anymore. Later that night, Paul and Penny come back. They meet Harry at the entrance. They all then start eating for dinner. The silence is so loud and it's uncomfortable. Harry asks about their trip. These two are having good chemistry. Marianne feels weird. A lizard drops on the table, scaring everyone. Penny leaves to go watch a movie. After an awkward silence, Harry leaves brutally. He comes to his daughter's room. She says she is ready to leave this island. She had her vacation. She will always remember it, she says. He comes back to Paul. He seems angry. He looks at Paul. Paul then goes to Marianne. Penny is watching a movie. Meanwhile, outside, Paul is laying down. Harry arrives to him. He seems drunk. He goes for a swim, comes back, and tells Paul, if you have something to tell me, say it. Paul tells Harry to keep it down. Harry says he and his daughter are leaving tomorrow. Harry asks if he made love to his daughter. Paul asks if he made love to Marianne. Harry says we were brothers, and now you just tolerate me. He says you don't deserve Marianne or Penny. Harry says I gave you Marianne. Harry slaps Paul. Paul is shocked he hit him, and pushes him to the pool. Harry drags him to the pool as well. They fight in the pool and Paul drowns Harry. Paul realizes it and tries to bring him back to life with CPR. But it's not working. He is dead. In the early morning, Paul comes back to the house and is in deep shock. He then comes to the bed. Marianne wakes up. He kisses her. The next day, the maid finds the body of Harry in the pool. She goes to tell it to Marianne, who wakes up and straight up notices the bruises on Paul's body. She runs to the pool screaming and crying. Penny then sees it. Paul hugs Marianne to comfort her. Cops then arrive. The detective calls Paul to ask some questions. Meanwhile, the rest are having a quiet breakfast. The detective realizes some bruises on Marianne. He asks then what time Harry got in the water. They say after 10 p.m. They were all sleeping already. He then asks what time each one went to sleep. The maid is translating because he doesn't speak English. Paul is so anxious as the police is retrieving the body of Harry. Marianne looks at Penny and Paul in a weird way. The three of them then go to the police station. They get copies of their passports. The detective then interviews Paul. Meanwhile, Marianne points out to Penny that yesterday Paul had wounds. Penny did see the wounds. Paul is finished. As the detective speaks so loud, Penny speaks in his language and asks for some respect. Paul and Marianne are shocked she can speak the language. Now it's time for Marianne for her interview. Paul asks Penny if she was awake last night. She doesn't say anything. Meanwhile, the detective says that evidences shows that there was two people in the pool, maybe fighting. She says if you think of charging Paul, I need to call my lawyer. The detective tells her don't worry. Paul on the other hand gets closer to Penny and whispers to her, please tell me if you were awake last night. The detective then talks about immigrants coming to the city. They get wild, so he suspects them. Marianne then says there is path behind the house that gets to the pool. She adds that anybody could have sneaked in by that path and drown Harry. Marianne is realizing the blame may be put on those immigrants. The detective adds that her and Paul should stay, but Penny can travel, but only with a letter of her mom because she is 17. Marianne realizes she lied to her saying she was 22. The three of them then get back home. Later Marianne searches for Paul. She walks around wondering where he is. She then sees him. He is seating. Both stare at each other. She sits down next to him and grabs his hand. Maybe she actually suspects it was him. He starts crying. He then opens up saying he tries to save him. She kisses him, and he apologizes to her. He cries as he says, "I am so sorry." We then get a flashback of the singing days of Marianne. She is getting ready for a concert when Harry comes in. He tries to flirt with her. She gets annoyed. He tries to kiss her. She pushes him saying it's done. It's over between us. We are now back to the present. Marianne is looking over Penny's sitting. The three of them then drive to the airport. They arrive all wet because it was raining. Marianne confronts her saying, "Why did you lie to us? You are not 22, you are 17, and you speak Italian. And you sat there while we were having a hard time communicate. Do you like watching people having a hard time?" Penny says don't let it upset you. Marianne slaps her. Penny leaves. Penny goes through security check, as Marianne and Paul watches her. Penny cries as she is leaving. She looks back but they are already gone. She gets in the plane and cries. The plane leaves. Marianne and Paul are driving when police stops them. It's the detective. He comes out, and give her some paper. Paul is anxious but it's actually an album of Marianne and the detective wants an autograph. She smiles and signs. He is so happy, over the top. He thanks her so much. He is so emotional. She finds him so funny. Paul, realizing he only wanted the autograph, starts smiling too. The movie ends. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and check our other movies summaries.